Imagine a battlefield where the enemy can vanish at any moment, without warning, where every move could be the last. What happens when a tank, invincible and powerful, encounters the unexpected? A mine. They don't choose. They are deadly traps hidden in the terrain, waiting for anyone who dares to advance. But what happens when even the soldiers themselves don't realize the danger until it's too late? Stay until the end.
What you are about to see contains real war footage. It is presented strictly for documentary purposes. We do not encourage violence. Recommended for 18+.
A Russian tank advances through a devastated area, passing the ruins of an abandoned village, aiming to attack Ukrainian positions. The narrow streets, collapsing buildings, and craters scattered throughout the area present both a tactical opportunity and a great danger for the armored vehicle. After completing its offensive, the vehicle tries to move forward, but its movement lasts only a few moments. After traveling just a few meters, the tank triggers an anti-tank mine, which was carefully hidden beneath the ground. The explosion violently shakes the armored structure, sending smoke and flames rising into the air. The impact severely damages the tank, making it unable to continue. The vehicle is completely neutralized. A new perspective then reveals how well-planned the Ukrainian strategy was in positioning the mine. Another Russian tank, carrying 24 infantry soldiers, attempts to advance through extremely uneven terrain. The adverse conditions of the ground make it difficult for the armored vehicle to move, but it continues at a considerable speed. Despite this, at the end of this difficult path, a deadly trap awaits: an anti-tank mine. Upon hitting the explosive, a massive detonation occurs. The tank is instantly damaged to the point of being unable to continue, severely compromised by the blast. However, something unusual catches attention right after the attack. 24 soldiers emerge from inside the tank. The scene is surprising, as it is rare for an armored vehicle of this type to carry so many soldiers. Here are some impressive images where Ukrainian soldiers are seen moving mines with their feet, simply pushing them out of the way. This raises an immediate question: why don't these explosives detonate? These mines are not conventional. They are TM62M devices, anti-tank models equipped with about 8 kilograms of high-power explosive TNT. However, they require considerable force to be triggered, something between 150 and 550 kilograms of pressure. In another scene recorded in a village completely devastated by war, the trail of destruction is visible on all sides: ruined houses, debris scattered, and a desolate environment. A Russian armored vehicle advances slowly through the rubble, crossing a narrow street marked by an unusual groove in the ground, perhaps formed by another vehicle or shaped by previous explosions. The place seems quiet, but there is a latent tension in the air. Despite the strange terrain, the tank continues its march without hesitation. This choice, however, proves fatal. Moments after crossing the area, a powerful detonation violently throws it back. The explosion comes from a strategically concealed anti-tank mine. What seemed like just an imperfection in the terrain was, in fact, a meticulously prepared trap. This episode reinforces how the intelligent use of terrain and technical knowledge can be decisive in armed conflict. In another part of the conflict, in the Rubizhny sector of Kharkiv, Russian forces advance along a rural road. Ahead is a military vehicle, followed by a tactical ATV. As they move forward, the lead vehicle triggers a TM62 mine, causing a devastating explosion. The impact is even more destructive due to the presence of anti-tank missiles stored aboard, which are detonated by the initial blast, intensifying the damage. After the explosion, a soldier dismounts from the ATV and heads to the impact point. The Russian vehicle has been completely destroyed, a brutal depiction of the violence of war. These remnants are scattered across the surrounding terrain. The TM62 mine contains between 7 and 8 kilograms of explosives, usually TNT or similar substances, resulting in an extremely powerful blast. Vehicles with limited underbody protection are particularly vulnerable. A landmine is an explosive device buried in the ground, designed to eliminate enemy targets, ranging from soldiers to tanks and other military vehicles. Now, let's understand the components and operation of this type of mine. The upper part, known as the pressure plate, triggers the explosion when pressed. The firing pin, when activated, starts the detonation process. The ignition system can function through direct impact via a spring, friction in a sensitive pyrotechnic compound, or by an electrical discharge. The main charge of the mine is composed of a stable explosive, which is only activated after the explosion of a more sensitive intermediate charge. This intermediate charge, or booster, is extremely reactive and serves to amplify the initial impact of the detonator, ensuring complete detonation of the main charge. The external structure of the mine, known as the casing, serves to protect all these components. When pressure is applied to the activation plate, a spring-loaded striker is released, hitting the impact detonator. When this happens, triggered by the victim, the main explosive charge of the mine is set off. The detonation generates a powerful shockwave made of superheated gases. This wave creates intense compressive force directed upwards, causing the explosion. A Russian armored vehicle advanced toward the front line with the objective of attacking Ukrainian positions. Surrounded by dust and dense smoke, the combat vehicle identified the target and began shelling. However, in a completely unexpected moment, the tank collided with a hidden anti-tank mine. The violent detonation ripped off the tank's tracks, propelling its base into the air. The engine was immediately shut down. The sudden impact not only destabilized the tank crew, but also surprised all nearby Russian units. The unexpected explosion dismantled the planned offensive, rendering the attack ineffective. Another Russian armored vehicle faces a setback in the midst of the chaos of war. The tank advances slowly and cautiously, as if sensing an imminent risk. There is an eerie stillness in the steppe landscape, which is abruptly interrupted by a devastating explosion. As it passes over a damaged stretch of road, the vehicle hits an anti-tank mine. The explosion shakes the tank violently, causing one of the tracks to come loose and completely disabling the engine. The armored vehicle is left stranded, unable to continue. But the most surprising aspect of the incident is another. Reports indicate that the mine was not planted by the Ukrainians, but by the Russian troops themselves, possibly during a retreat or as a defensive measure, and was later forgotten. 3 Russian tanks were advancing towards Ukrainian positions, determined to break through the defenses, but they were stopped. The crew of one of the tanks, in a tactical retreat, began maneuvering backward, but the situation took a fatal turn. The tank, in its attempt to retreat, overlooked a crucial detail. The terrain was mined. Before the crew could adjust their position, the deafening blast of an explosion echoed across the front lines. In the footage, a Russian tank advances towards Ukrainian positions. Although the road appears smooth and accessible, it is located very close to the combat zone. Ukrainian forces do not want the enemy to use these routes for rapid movement and logistical support. Therefore, they are heavily loaded with anti-tank mines. The Russian tank, unaware of the danger, moves forward with its robust armor, advancing without hesitation, straight into the mined field. Suddenly, a series of explosions occurs almost simultaneously. It is not just one mine. It is likely that multiple anti-tank mines were triggered at the same time. The force of the explosions shakes the ground, and the tank is thrown into the air. The combined impact renders the vehicle completely inoperable. Although the explosions were powerful, the crew survives and manages to exit the armored vehicle, collecting their equipment. Hit that like button